It's a new day dawning, the time is at hand, where the glory of the Lord will be revealed to every man. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in.
All right. Open up the door. Starts right now. So fling wide, you heavenly gates, and prepare the way of the risen Lord. The Apostle John was on the island of Patmos. He was in prison for the testimony of Jesus Christ. And he heard a sound behind him. He turned around until I looked. There was a door standing open in heaven. And I heard a voice which was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, come on up here. I want to show you some things that must take place. That's what we need, my friends. We need a heavenly perspective. The things that are going on in the world around us. The things that the Word of God foretold us would come to pass. Those things which must take place. Those things which are taking place even now, even as I speak. That is what this broadcast is all about. Discussing the issues of the day. Discerning the times in which we live from a biblical perspective and world view. Good afternoon, everybody. Andy White here. And what you are about to hear is the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. And I am here on the east end of Long Island, penetrating the unseen powers of darkness by simply speaking the truth of light. And I am sending powers and principalities into frothy fits of frenzy. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for tuning in all across the fruited plain and all around the spherical globe. Hey, do me a favor. Listen, I am streaming live over on my Open Up the Doors Facebook page. If you go on over there to facebook.com/faithfm91.7, please join in the conversation there. Let me know where you're watching from. Shoot me some comments. Shoot me some input. I'd like the broadcast to be as interactive as possible. I'll try and keep an eye on my comments this week more so than ever, because I do like to interact with the audience. I really, really do. So go on over and join in the conversation there on my Open Up the Doors Facebook page. And you can also email me. This is important, folks. This is going to go somewhere. You can also email me at ajwhite777@icloud.com. It's ajwhite777@icloud.com. If you have never gotten the Faith FM app, I would like to just strongly urge you to download that app if you're outside of the FM broadcast area. You can download the app at hamptonschristian.com. We got the app for the Apple, the Apple platforms, the Android platforms, whatever your tablet or phone might be. You can listen to, Christian broadcasting from the east end of Long Island 24/7. Some great broadcasting throughout the day, throughout the week. Anyway, as I just said, I said, listen very carefully when I give you my email address. This broadcast today might be a little bit different than normal because I want to address some things that have transpired during the week, especially since last week's broadcast. And I'm going to address some issues and address some misunderstandings and actually use that as a bit of a platform to elaborate some more on the things I was sharing last week, things I just couldn't get to. They're all tied together. But last week I rhetorically asked, are we approaching critical mass? There's so much going on in so many different areas in the political, cultural, social, geopolitical realm. All these things going on, and it seems like that they're all converging together to a point of meltdown, to a point of breakdown, to what I said last week, to a point of approaching critical mass. And I'm going to elaborate some more on that, but I need to speak to a couple of things. After last week's broadcast, a listener contacted the station here, upset about some things that I said. Actually upset about some things he thought I said. Let me emphasize that. Upset about some things he thought I said, and I want to address that a little bit. The listener stated some things in an email that some things I actually never said at all. I actually went back and I listened to the broadcast saying, I didn't say that. But I went back. We've got these broadcasts archived. I post them up on my Open Up the Doors Facebook page. They're all on my YouTube page. So I went back and I listened to the broadcast to determine some of the things he said he was concerned about and accused me of. And in this email, like I said, he mentioned some things I never said at all. And then the couple of things that he got right, he really didn't get right. He misquoted and really mischaracterized some of the things that I said. And I want to share that because it really speaks in a lot of ways to a much larger and very relevant issue that we're all facing all across the media culture. But I want to say this. I listen, you know what? I understand the nature of radio. I really do. I mean, you could be driving down the road. In fact, I think this person actually was. You could be driving down the road. You didn't hear the whole broadcast. You didn't hear the context. You're flipping around your radio dial. You tune in, and all of a sudden, maybe you hear just one sentence, or you think you heard something that really wasn't said right, because there's road noise. You're not really paying a lot of attention. Hopefully, you're driving like you should. Get your eyes on the road. But again, I understand that. I really do take that into consideration. That sometimes people hear things that they just mishear things. Or, again, because they're tuning in into the middle of a situation, into the middle of a broadcast, they're not getting a full context. So I always urge people, number one, we archive the shows. They're up on the Open Up the Doors Facebook page. But this is one of the reasons I give you my email every single week. Because I always say, if you want to discuss something that was said during the broadcast, feel free to contact me. Feel free to have a dialogue with me. I very often also state for the caveat, as a caveat for the clarity and respect for Faith FM, that the views expressed by me on this broadcast are not necessarily the views of Faith FM. So, again, we believe in the First Amendment here, and in the right to free speech, in the right to freedom of thought and conscience. So, again, we're going to have a diversity of opinions. Now, of course, having said that, this being a Christian radio station, our views, when I say, my views are not necessarily the views of Faith FM, of course, they're within reasonable parameters because this is a Christian radio station. So, we're going to have reasonable parameters in our general world view. We obviously wouldn't have a broadcast or a show on here that espoused atheism, for example. That would be completely contrary to the mission of Faith FM if we had a broadcast. So again, we believe in free speech. Hey, listen, if you want to have a show on atheism, go ahead and go on a secular, a radio station. We believe in free speech and the free exchange of ideas. But again, there are areas of different perspectives and different perspectives is probably the best word to use, that are not necessarily the views of Faith FM. Which, again, if you have a question about something I said and you want to gain further understanding, I always say I'm open to dialogue. I'm open to reasonable, productive conversation. If you misheard something, if you misunderstood something, contact me, AJ White 777 at iCloud.com. That's the way to really do it. And I really just want to convey that over and over again, because it's easy to not deal with the situation because of awkwardness or because of it's not comfortable, so it's easier to just email the station and then make a bunch of accusations. Maybe you don't realize that we can go back and listen to the tape that aren't true. So for that person that listened to the broadcast last week, I hope you're there this week, because we did encourage you to listen to the broadcast and maybe get a fuller understanding, because obviously the things that you heard last week were taken grossly out of context. I'm not going to get into some of the things that was actually said, other than the fact that I want to address this, because see, I'm not a snowflake, and I will handle issues straight on, so that you would know my heart. Because this person that wrote, I didn't know the person, and I reached out to him. As a matter of fact, I sent him an email. He didn't respond. And if you want to have a genuine conversation to overcome misunderstandings, and as Christians we are to do that, then we need to do that. We need to learn to, even if we disagree on something, we need to learn to agree to disagree, in an agreeable fashion. And the only way you can do that is by reaching out to a person, because obviously this person last week doesn't know me at all, didn't understand what I was saying at all, and maybe had a knee-jerk reaction because they heard some things out of context. And I'm saying that to say this, because I will deal with all these issues, and they're going to evolve into a broader issue. But this is one thing that I need to address, because I will not stand, and I will not let it go unanswered for someone to call me a racist, for someone to question my Christianity, for someone to, you want to disagree with a position, that's your prerogative. But the minute you get into smearing, and the minute you get into impugning someone's character that you don't even know, because you don't agree with the position they hold, then I need to address that. Like I said, we can agree to disagree, but I'm not going to let somebody smear and impugn my character, and I'm going to address this, because this is something that is being done in the world at large, especially all across the media, and it's really a typical thing. Now, listen, I know that I've got people from all sides of the aisle here, so I'm a conservative, but I have people who listen who are middle of the road. I have people who listen that are on the left side of the aisle, and so I'm going to say things that I guarantee you are going to upset people on the left side of the aisle. That's my perspective. Again, we can discuss certain things in an agreeable, civil fashion, but I need to say something here because it's a typical thing, and this is just sincere. It's a typical thing for leftists when they're losing an argument based on the facts that they resort to impugning one's character through invective and slanderous accusations. It's their MO. I see it all across the media all the time. And they're always running to the first thing, it's the cry of racism, you're a racist. It's their most often used smear tactic. And I can get really heated about this, and I said to myself, I'm going to keep calm because it's something to get really angry about. You see, when people don't like the reality of the facts on the ground, or what those facts are actually proving or suggesting, then they seek to twist those facts as best they can, usually by misquoting, taking out of context, and mischaracterizing something that was said or done. And when all else fails, simply misrepresent what was said and use it as a basis for the charge of racism. And that has sadly become rampant all across the mainstream media. The left and the open borders crowd has done an extraordinarily good job of blurring the lines between legal immigration and illegal immigration. And by doing that, they are masters at doing that. And this is how they do it. They change definitions, they redefine terms, and they use euphemisms like undocumented immigrant. That's a euphemism. Undocumented immigrant is an illegal alien. And they change the language, they change the definitions to define illegal aliens. And in so doing, and they're masters at it, and they've done it, they have completely conflated legal and illegal immigration, and they put it all under one heading. And there is such a difference. Most of us Americans, most, not all, believe in controlling our borders, and we believe in immigration in a legal fashion. America, and here's the thing, and here's where I'm really going with this. America is supposed to be a nation founded upon laws and equal justice under those laws. Both of these basic tenets of American jurisprudence are under assault, my friends. Basic understanding of law is an egregious assault going on. There is a multi-tiered, some people are saying we have a dual-tiered justice system, but I'm beginning to see a multi-tiered justice system that's being set in place by leftist policies and their political elite class. I won't even go into the travesty of the things that the Clintons have gotten away with because of their pals in the DOJ, like James Comey, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Andy McCabe, Rod Rosenstein, et al., etc., by way of example. I won't even go down that road. But if the things that they did, if we did them, we'd be rotting in a jail cell right now. But here we go. I don't want to digress too much, but here's the thing. A multi-tiered justice system. Then you add to that the illegal policies. The illegal policies that these ultra-leftists put into place, sanctuary cities, sanctuary states that ignore statutory immigration law, being some of the most egregious and most dangerous. Last week, by way of example of the right way and the things that we support about what made this country great and its immigration, I talked about a guy named Ranil Singh, who was an immigrant from Fiji of Indian descent, brown-skinned man, who came into this country legally, who pursued the American dream, he pursued his dream of becoming an American police officer, and he did that, and he did it the right way, the way we all applaud, the way we all accept. And the irony in this sad, tragic story was this man who did it the right way, and the way we would all agree with, a legal immigrant, was murdered by an illegal immigrant because he was caught. This guy who killed this cop was he already had a record, but in sanctuary states like California, where they're trampling upon the laws of America, this guy was let loose time and time again. He wasn't deported, and this is the point, people. It's not about racism. It's about the law. It's about laws being put in place that are there to protect and help people. And I am sick and tired of the racist label and the racist rhetoric that's so easily thrown about to stop the conversation, to break down the conversation. So here's what I'm saying. I'm saying there's one set of rules and laws for the powerful elites. There's another set of rules for the average American, you and me. And apparently there's another set of rules being developed for illegal aliens. This is the problem. So let's get it out of our heads that it's about the browning of America or whatever, or xenophobia, because those are lies. Those are lies for the average American. I'm not saying there isn't racism out there, but that's a minority of people. These statements and these things I'm sharing have nothing to do about racism or anything remotely connected to racism. It's about the rule of law. It's about equal justice under the law. It's about the application of the laws equally for everybody. Jesus said one of the signs in the last days would be lawlessness. Men's hearts failing them. The love of many growing cold because of lawlessness. And that's what's happening. Our country is being ripped apart, not because of racism per se, except except for those who keep on beating that drum of racism to stoke it up and to foment it, which is what they are doing. I talked about the Hegelian dialectic last week, about these opposing forces and how they're being manipulated. This is what's going on, and we've got to speak to it. We have to speak to it, because what I am speaking to is about the lawlessness. It's about the elitists in power, the statists who are trampling all of our rights, and they're doing it by circumventing the laws established. You don't like the laws, we've got a process for changing the laws. But you just can't simply say, hey, we're going to have sanctuary cities, and we're going to have sanctuary states, and we're not going to prosecute this, but if you do it, we're going to prosecute you. But let me bring the ball downfield further and develop this a little bit more. Because I heard one so-called minister make the erroneous assertion that God doesn't make borders, man does. I don't know how the supposed minister has such an ignorance of the Word of God. He evidently hasn't read his Bible. When Israel entered the promised land, God spent a lot of time, energy, and space in the Bible setting up the borders for the 12 tribes of Israel and the borders of the land of Israel. In the book of Acts, Paul, speaking on Mars Hill, flatly stated in Acts 17:26 that God has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. God has set up the nations. God has determined the boundaries of their dwellings. Borders are not immoral. Border security is not a sin. But you see, we've allowed those with their agendas to change the definitions, to frame the narrative. And so often people have only selective hearing. Oh, this is what happened this week. I'm going to give you some examples of what I'm talking about right now. Because folks, very often people only hear what they want to hear. They only see what they want to see, because they hope to validate their own presuppositions and narratives that they have already framed. Look, for instance, look at what's just been going on this past week with the Catholic school kids from Kentucky. It was disgusting and even dangerous. It was a dangerous thing that was done by the news media in its initial reporting regarding that incident. I didn't post. I bet you some people were surprised, because I said very little during the week while all this was going back and forth, from the original reports to everything that was happening, to all the debates. I was this week with that incident, I was just sitting back and watching where it was going and what was happening. I wasn't ignoring it. I was very much in tune to it, but I wanted to see where it was going, because if it wasn't for the fact that there was a whole lot more video evidence that completely destroyed the mainstream media's patently false narrative, the record would never have been corrected, and the damage would have been irreparable. As it is, there's still serious fallout, and there's still disgusting and serious threats being made against these kids and against their families by those who don't care that it was a false story, that it was a misrepresented story, that was a mischaracterization of what actually happened. But they're like crazed, frenzied sharks after the water has been chummed with red meat. They couldn't even open the school the other day. And all these people with the most disgusting, outrageous tweets. And they're all coming from those tolerable people on the left. The Kathy Griffins and some of these other Hollywood types calling for the assassination of these kids, calling for the school, for their school to be shot up. If you and I said things like that as a conservative, number one, we wouldn't. But if we did, we would be rightfully excoriated. It's horrible. But here it is. I said a moment ago, people see what they want to see, they hear what they want to hear. And in this incident, you had all the elements for the mainstream media's narrative that they've been painting for years now. Here you had a group of flyover country white kids from Kentucky. Oh, they're Catholic. Oh, they're white. Oh, they're male. Oh, even worse, they're marching at a pro-life rally in D.C. And horror of horrors, they're wearing MAGA hats. There you go. That's all they needed to see. The video could have had no sound on it, but that's all the media needed to see. What could be more racist, more misogynist, more homophobic, or whatever invective you want to use? What could be more disgusting than that? Because that's the picture they wanted to paint. That's the narrative they wanted to run with. And they've gotten away with it for too long, except today. There's just too much social media out there. It's got its pros, it's got its cons. But there's too many cameras in the hands of people now. So we can fight back against their biased reporting. And more than biased reporting, their outright lying reporting, because they have an agenda, people. It's just not innocent misrepresentation. Make no mistake about it, this war is only just getting started. We are rapidly approaching critical mass. And in a rare moment of honesty, before I go to my break, listen to what Joy Behar, of all people, said on The View the other day. after Whoopi Goldberg begrudgingly admitted that the media got it all wrong, really wrong. Whoopi Goldberg said this, quote, "Many people admitted they made snap judgments before these other facts came in. But is it that we just instantly say that's what it is based on what we see in that moment? And then we have to walk it back when it turns out we're wrong." And they've been doing this time and time again in the media. And Whoopi Goldberg said this. Why is that? This is Whoopi Goldberg. Why is it we keep making the same mistake? And then Joy Behar jumped in. And in a rare but very revealing moment of honesty, Joy Behar said this: "Because we're desperate to get Trump out of office, that's why." There you go, folks. An admission on the panel of The View that they keep getting it wrong time and time again. The media keeps painting their narrative only to pull it back time and time again. And it's all because they've got one goal in mind: get Trump. But what about these kids, these innocent teenagers who were waiting for a bus, whose lives have been threatened now because of your dangerous agenda? Joy Behar said, "I think the press jumps the gun a lot." You think, Joy? I think the press jumps the gun a lot because, we just it's wishful thinking. We just want to bring down Trump and his supporters. Now, folks, I'm not saying this as a Trump and his supporters. I've talked about my positions on our president through the past. Like any other politician, there's some things I agree with, some things I don't. But when you have a media, a powerful mainstream media, attacking a president like this and his supporters, that's you, half the country. Joy Behar basically said, it's wishful thinking. That's why we keep jumping the gun. In other words, we want it to be true. People, I've said this on many occasions. I've criticized fake news on both sides of the aisle on this broadcast. But just because you want something to be true doesn't mean it is true. You got to vet the stories. You've got to wait and see for all the facts to come out. But here we go. We're criticized for calling the mainstream media propaganda press the enemy of the people. Oh, the press is the enemy of people. Stop using the enemy of the people. But here you have it. We have an admission from the illustrious panel of The View. Because I want to tell you something. The press certainly was the enemy of these Catholic school kids. They received all kinds of ugly and disgusting threats. Their parents, their school, all instigated by a story twisted to frame a narrative that fits their agenda. If that's not being the enemy of the people, I don't know what is. I'm going to take a break, folks, but I'm going to have some more. Here's Sanctus Real. Keep my heart alive. Because in the midst of all this stuff, folks, our love can grow cold. Sanctus Real. Jesus, keep my heart alive. And that's what we all need in these days in which we live, folks, because Jesus did say in the last days, because lawlessness would increase, the love of many would grow cold. And that's why we need to keep our hearts alive in the Word of God and let our worldview be dictated by the Word of God. Welcome back if you're just tuning in. Andy White here. You are listening to Open Up the Doors here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in that peak, WEGQ 91.7 in Quag. And let me say it, the views expressed by the host of this show, which is me, are molded by the Word of God along with my own empirical evidence, both experiential and observational, which is lived out by me on a daily basis. The views I hold may not necessarily be the views of Faith FM. But if you'd like to discuss them, email me at ajwhite777@icloud.com, and I will always, to the best of my ability, treat you with respect and dignity, even if we disagree. Oh, yes, I get heated at times. We all do. We like our debates. We like our arguments. And yes, sometimes we regret maybe getting a little bit overheated. But I do believe in the basic dignity of humanity because we were all created in the image and likeness of God. That's why I get very offended when someone so loosely accuses and throws around the word racist, especially people who don't even know me. But I Again, last week I rhetorically asked the question, are we reaching critical mass? Because 1 week later, it seems like with all the stuff that's going on, it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. One of the things I said last week that was misunderstood, and I want to get into this because this is actually very important. Last week I made the statement, and it was in response to something that Juan Williams had shared on the View, and I made the response in the context. I said if the Hondurans, because we were talking about the caravan, and I made a comment that if the Hondurans love their country so much, because they're marching up in this caravan, they're coming up to our border, to crash our borders, waving the Honduran flags. And I asked the question, why aren't they waving American flags if they love us so much? Why, if they love their country so much, why don't they stay there and fix it? And that was misunderstood. But I want to share something with you, the background of why I said that. Because about a month ago, it was in a lot of the major newspapers, a Honduran missionary wrote an article or an open letter. She's been a Honduran missionary for many years. She's married to a Honduran national. She's got, her children are Honduran. She's got foster children. She's got 11 foster children. In fact, let me read her bio. Let me pull down. I'm going to share some things from this letter she wrote, because that was behind the things I was saying. Her name is Jennifer Zilli Canales, if I'm pronouncing her name. She's a missionary living in El Pino, Honduras, and I'm going to read this letter and share what she wrote as someone who's working amongst the Honduran people and what I was getting at. Quote, I'm just going to quote her out of this article. She said, I am a U.S. citizen, married to a Honduran, and since we said our vows 5 years ago, we have parented 11 orphaned and abandoned children and teens in this third world country. 7 still live with us and call us mom and dad. We have also started a community homeschool out of our rural homestead, where we serve as directors, teachers, and guides for dozens of local at-risk youth. We intentionally live without air conditioning, without television, without high-speed internet, and without a washing machine or dishwasher. The cinder block home we inhabit on the outskirts of a little rural Honduran town is less than half the size of the home in Texas where I grew up. As the large caravans of Hondurans and other Central Americans parade north to the U.S. border, we who are here in Honduras are deeply troubled to see this wrong mindset affect many in our area. I personally feel ashamed and angry about the chaos some of these uneducated immigrants will thrust upon the U.S. and in the way in which they have forsaken international laws and police barricades cannot be justified, which is what I was getting at in the last block. She goes on to say, some indeed are refugees seeking asylum. Now, this is a long article. I don't want to go through everything here. She talks about the working conditions, the low income, and all that. But I want you to hear something she says here, because this is what I was really reflecting on. She talks about the violence. She talks about how that violence affected her own family, how her own brother-in-law was shot dead by 2 years ago. He was just shot dead in the streets. She's not saying there aren't problems there, but she's there working to help solve the problems. And there's a paragraph here that really caught my attention, because this is something that I was getting at last week. I was sharing last week how the powers that be are lying to these people, how the powers are abusing and misusing these people, exploiting these people. And she's running a school. She's teaching them math. She's teaching them to read. She's teaching them, she's giving them an education. And they're coming to the school, the politicos, the powerful elite. They're coming to the school, and they're taking them out of the school to put them in these in these caravans. I'm looking for. We are working very hard on our end to inform our students and their families of the harshness of the trip through Mexico and the reality of what most likely awaits them, even if they make it across the border. Our desire is to offer opportunities, educational, employment, spiritual, right here in Honduras, and reach this generation how to live a dignified lifestyle and make productive choices here. I am currently teaching an intensive 5-week geography class Let me go down. Trying to teach people how to live a life as honest as possible right here in Honduras. Hold on. She says this. Honduras, this was the main point, really. I'm just trying to scat read this because I don't have a lot of time. But she writes, Honduras is in desperate need of reform and an effective judicial system, as it is overwhelmingly true that injustice and violence reign. But that does not mean that the solution is for Hondurans to flee the country. Receiving the immigrants with open arms will only cause more to follow in their path, as many are quick to point out the Honduran government's fault, but they're not willing to stay in their homeland long enough to be part of the solution. In another part of this article, she talked about how some of these people that were sponsoring these caravans took a couple of kids out of the school with the father, and once they got to the Guatemalan border, they happened to be arrested, and the girls were taken from the father and put in an orphanage. And she goes on. I'm going to post this letter on Open Up the Doors later today. But she goes on to say, was this a better future for them? And the whole point is this, is that, yeah, there are problems. We understand that. I shared this last week. We understand that there are people fleeing for the hope of a better life. We get that. We understand that. But these people in particular, many of them are being exploited. They're being used and they're being abused. And for those to say, well, the government is just too repressive, I say, well, you know what? That's how America started. And when I said, if they love their country so much, why don't they stay there and fix it? Understand, it wasn't racist. It was actually a rhetorical question based on even what this missionary who's working there is saying. If you drain out our people, how are we going to fix the problems here? And they're coming up and they're unskilled and they're uneducated. So they're not going to they're going to have the same problems. They're going to be dealing with the same problems no matter where they are. I have a stack of stuff here talking about how the breaking of our laws. If I talked about the multi-tiered legal system that's evolving in this country, and it's a question of lawlessness. It's a question of laws. It's a question of borders. But I got to take a break. I'm seeing I'm going long here. I'm going to get back to this in a couple of minutes, folks. Stick around, please. Fusion of Heart, Mind, and Soul. This is Open Up the Doors with Andy White here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in FE, WEGQ 91.7 in Quag. Hey, thanks for joining in, everybody, on this Open Up the Doors Thursday. If you're just tuning in, I am Facebook streaming live on my Open Up the Doors Facebook page. Join in the conversation over there at facebook.com/faithfm 91.7. Let me know where you're watching from. Get into the conversation. Introduce yourself. Hey, join the family. If you've never liked my Open Up the Doors page, please like the page and stay in contact with us. If you'd like to email me, very important, you can email me at ajwhite777 at icloud.com. That's ajwhite777 at icloud.com. I got a lot of stuff here that I know I'm not going to get to, but I was talking a moment ago about this. One of the major crises, one of the major issues, and there's many of them, as you well know. But when we're talking about the border, when we're talking about the immigration issues, the things that are shutting down the government right now, the funding for the border wall, the funding for ICE, part of the reasons that there's an impasse with the budget is because the left doesn't want to fund the border wall. They don't want to fund ICE. And I talked about lawlessness. It's not a question of racism. We need to keep shooting that thing down. It's not about racism. Stop letting the left frame the narrative. It's not about racism. It's about the rule of law. We love legal immigrants. We love legal immigration. But we've got to protect our borders. And someone last week mentioned the economic repercussions of what's going on. And I've got a stack of stuff here that I'm not going to be able to get to, but just listen to some of these headlines. Again, I'm talking about this multi-tiered legal system where there's one set of rules for you and me, another set of rules for the powerful elites, and another set of rules apparently for illegal aliens. Forbes magazine, IRS admits, it encourages illegals to steal Social Security numbers for taxes. That's just a headline. I don't have time to get into the nitty-gritty details of the article. But another article here, I'm going to read a little bit of this. Tax loophole costs billions. This was a Channel 13 NBC in Indiana expose. Now let me tell you something. NBC is not a right-wing organization, folks, but they did an expose. Let me read to you some of this. Channel 13 investigators have found many undocumented workers are claiming the tax credit for kids who live in Mexico. Lots of kids in Mexico. Quote from the whistleblower at Eyewitness News in Indiana. Quote, we've seen sometimes 10 or 12 dependents, most times nieces and nephews on these tax forms. The more you put on there, the more you get back. The whistleblower has thousands of examples. He's from the IRS. The whistleblower has thousands of examples, and he brought some of them to 13 Investigates. Here's one. Here we have a return where the illegal aliens using an it's called an ITIN number. It's called a individual tax identification number. If they don't have a Social Security number, but remember the IRS doesn't care if they have a fake Social Security number. You know, if you and I use a fake Social Security number, we go to jail, but not if you're an illegal alien. This is the stuff we're talking about. This has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with the rule of law. The Bible tells us as Christians that we're to obey the authorities. We are to obey the laws of the land as long as those laws are not against the laws of God. But under this individual tax identification number, these illegal aliens are racking up tax returns, 10,000. One person. This was I'll go to the most egregious one because I've only got a few minutes left. The most egregious one. They put in for 20 kids who weren't even living with them. The tax credit, the earned income tax credit, is for kids that you take care of in your own home. And this one family received almost $30,000, $29,608. $29,608 was sent to illegal immigrants for their child tax credit. I'm telling you, folks, you and I do that. They throw us in the locker and they throw away the key. Trust me on that. This has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with the rule of law. It has everything to do with crashing the system. Like I talked about last week, the Saul Alinsky rules for radicals, how to crash the system. You crash the system by overwhelming it. You crash the immigration system by overwhelming the borders. You crash the welfare system by doing things like this where hundreds of millions of dollars are being defrauded and stolen from the American taxpayer. Those are facts. Facts aren't racist. Someone sarcastically suggested the other day that if we're building walls, then we won't be able to spread the gospel because we're putting a wall around ourselves. Really? Walls will keep the gospel from going forth? Really? The mere suggestion of that is a straw man argument. First off, for those of us who've forgotten, America has been and still is the most generous, the most giving, the most charitable nation on the face of the earth. We send out more missionaries all across the world, and a border wall isn't going to stop that. What a silly argument. I'm hearing talk, like I shared from last week, about walls being immoral or anti-gospel. If walls are immoral, then why did God send Nehemiah to rebuild the walls and repair the gates of Jerusalem? And the only people that tried to stop him were their enemies. Why did Israel? Walls don't work. Why did Israel lament facing the city of Jericho? Because it was a walled city and walls do work. And it took a supernatural act of God to see those walls come down. But what was the reason? So that Israel could capture and plunder the city because walls work, folks. Why does the Bible associate a person who has no control over his own emotions to be like a city without walls? Proverbs 25:28. Whoever has no rule over his own spirit is like a city broken down without walls. If walls are immoral, why under King Asa In 2 Chronicles, it says that King Asa, the land enjoyed rest as they built walls around the cities of Judah. And as they built, God prospered them. Because walls work and they have a purpose. Walls are neither immoral nor racist. Walls can be used to protect your loved ones by keeping foreign invaders and enemies out. It's almost silly to even have to discuss this. Walls are safe for the community if you're imprisoning criminals. Of course, walls can be used for bad purposes. I think of Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall, but that's because they were trying to keep people out. They were trying to subjugate and enslave people. That's a different issue. But it ought to be needless to be said that there is no moral equivalency whatsoever between a wall that unjustly imprisons a population and a wall that is meant to protect a population. And I'm running out of time. No one is forcing anybody to stay in the United States. All are free to leave and wish to come and go as they wish, unlike the former Soviet Union. But what we ask, as a sovereign nation, we have the right to protect our sovereign borders in a way that we deem necessary. And I want to make one last appeal. I'm running out of time. But let me say to those who may be hearing this, and I say this in sincere love of the Spirit, if you are a Christian, and you are here in this country illegally, from anywhere in the world, I don't care what country it is, but if you are willfully not even trying to make it right, if you are not making an honest effort to become documented and legalized, not only are you violating American law, you are violating Scripture by not obeying the laws of the land. I urge you in love, please work with your pastors. Please work with your consulate and whoever else can help you to become a documented and legalized person. We love you. We welcome you. But I also admonish you to obey the Scripture, which clearly states to obey the governing authorities in matters that are not obviously against the laws of God. Folks, there's so much going on, and all these forces are on a collision course, and we are reaching critical mass. But I hope you heard my heart today. I gotta go. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Open Up the Doors. God bless everybody.